Milk Teeth, Annika Barranti Klein. The first time Father went away was the week of my 12th birthday. He left without warning and was gone for 3 days. It was before grandmother's palsy, before I met Jeet, before the teeth and so many other things. It was even before the wolves. Elizabeth, Father told me before he left, you are not a woman yet, but you will be soon. So you must put away childish things. I did not know what Father meant by childish things. Was it childish to read books? To sit in my window seat, watching across the meadow and waiting for something to happen? To sit in the parlor by the fire, knitting seemingly endless yards and yards of lace for my hope chest? I did not know. After Father left, while it was still light out, Grandmother took me to the mirror on the landing and asked me to show her my teeth. I did, and she clucked and nodded and said nothing more. The wolves came that night. Grandmother asked me to draw the curtains, and I saw them sitting on their haunches, looking at the house. I went from window to window, drawing the curtains as Grandmother asked, and looking out at the wolves. They were sitting in a ring around the entire house, shoulder to shoulder. They were inside the fence, only yards from the house. Grandmother did not say a word about them, only had me draw the curtains. The next day, Grandmother showed me a new knitting stitch pattern and kept me busy at my lace all day. I suppose, then, that knitting is not a childish thing. That night the wolves came again. I do not know how many wolves there were. Dozens, perhaps hundreds. One huge wolf, much larger than all the others, walked the circle, weaving among the seated wolves. The third day and night were the same. On the fourth day, Father came back. The wolves did not come that night. Not yet, Grandmother told him. Father did not speak again of putting away childish things. Father rarely tells me anything twice. He brought me a book when he returned, so at least I knew that reading was not a childish thing to his eyes. I put the book under my pillow and slept with it there for 1 moon cycle. Father went away again the next month. Grandmother once again had me draw the curtains every night. I hurt my finger and could not knit lace, so I sat in my window seat looking out over the meadow and read the book Father had brought me. It was a tale of terror, about a man who transformed into a monster called Mr. Hyde. Something about it got under my skin. I could feel the terror of it in my ribs, pulling at me, whispering to me. Something was at once familiar and repulsive about it. I read for 2 days. On the third day, I put the book in the stove. I spent the rest of the day looking out over the meadow, no knitting or book in hand. That night when I went to bed, I felt something under my head. I lifted my pillow and found the charred remains of the book. I stuffed my fist into my mouth to keep from screaming, though there was no one to hear me if I did. Grandmother is old and hard of hearing, and besides she sleeps in the tower, on the other side of many empty rooms. The next day when Father returned, he remarked on the shadows below my eyes. I had slept not a wink all night, terrified as I was of the book he'd given me. I could not tell him. You should be walking, Father told me. A girl needs fresh air. So I took up walking, mornings after porridge and afternoons before tea. I walked the fences that ringed our property. I suppose we were rich. The fences were long and well kept. I could not see how the wolves got in, unless they jumped over. I could not understand why the wolves only came when Father was away. Father went away again. Grandmother had me draw the curtains again. I hated to do it. Twilight was my favorite time of day. With the curtains drawn, it was as though the moon never rose in her full glory, only waxed to her most gibbous and protuberant point before disappearing for 3 days and reappearing, still gibbous but turned about and ready to wane again. The moon was like a lady dressing behind a screen, only I never got to see her in her gown. I took my walk that morning, staying closer to the house. I was worried about grandmother. She did not seem like herself. When I returned home, I found her in her tower, seated on the settee, reading. I sat next to her and she handed me her book. It was her favorite, Jane Eyre. I read her favorite passages aloud, and when she fell asleep for her nap, I sneaked out of her room and went for my afternoon walk. I was careful to be home before dark, but found myself walking faster for the last quarter mile as I heard animals in the woods. I was steps from the front path when I heard a howl. I turned around and saw a giant wolf inside the fence rushing at me. I ran up the path to the front door and fumbled with the catch. The wolf was nearly upon me when I wrenched the door open, flung myself through, and slammed it shut. In the morning, grandmother was unwell. Half of her face was unmoving, and she could not speak to me. I did not know what to do. I climbed up onto her bed with her and clung to her like a child, afraid and uncertain. She had wet herself, and the bed was soaked through, but grandmother could not get up, and besides, I could not lift the mattress. At noon there came a knocking at the door, a great pounding that shook me awake, terrified at first, then grateful because it meant help had come. I threw on my dressing gown and rushed down the stairs. I opened the door and found a strange man on the step, examining the doorframe where 2 large scratches cut deep into the wood. Scratches that had not been there before. I saw, too, a clump of fur caught in the latch. He had not noticed. I put my hand over it. "Are you the lady of the house?" he asked, and I laughed at the absurdity. I was only a child, and it seemed that I would never be a lady. "My name is Ersebet. My grandmother is the lady of the house." "Is she at home? But where are my manners? My name is Stuart Greenwood, Dr. Stuart Greenwood. I am on my way to Oxborough, and my carriage wheel has broken near your gate. I had hoped to find assistance here. Do you have a handyman or stableman who might help me?" "You're a doctor," I repeated, dumbfounded at my luck. "Yes, I am expected in Oxborough. I'll be taking over Dr. Breyer's practice." "My grandmother is sick. Can you help her? We do not have a groundskeeper, but I can walk with you to the neighbour's house. They keep a full staff. What seems to be wrong with your grandmother, Erzsébet?" "I don't know. She cannot get out of bed and doesn't speak." I began to cry and wished that I could stop myself. I felt like such a child just then, helpless and frightened. Dr. Greenwood turned away from me, and my stomach felt hard. He turned back just as quickly. "I'm going to my carriage for my bag. Will you put a kettle on?" I ran to the fire and stoked it, then filled the kettle. I was hungry suddenly, but would not allow myself to eat until Dr. Greenwood had examined grandmother. It seemed to take a long time for him to come back with his bag. I began to think he would not return, and then suddenly he was in the hall, calling to me. "Erzsébet," he said, so informal, but then he did not know our family name. He could not. It has been a long time since everyone in the countryside knew the name that went with the crest over our door. "Yes," I called back, anxious to have been away from grandmother for so long. Dr. Greenwood came up the stairs behind me, matching my hurried pace. He started at the mirror on the landing, but kept going after the briefest of hesitation. I ran down the hall and up the steps to grandmother's room, the doctor following several paces behind. She stirred, more than she had moved yet that day, and made a sound. She didn't speak, but I knew she was trying to. Dr. Greenwood came straight past me as I dallied several paces from the bed. He walked to grandmother's side and spoke softly to her. "My name is Dr. Greenwood. I'm here to help you. Can you take my hand?" "Good. Can you squeeze?" "Good. Now let's try the other hand." He was gentle and patient with grandmother, who could do none of what he asked, but followed him with one eye, the other drooping half shut. He turned to me. "What is your grandmother's name?" "Her given name." "Mrs. Ethelyn Pendergast," I told him, trying to rise to my full height to make him understand. Grandmother was a lady. He showed a flicker of recognition, but then it was gone, and he smiled. "Did you put that kettle on?" "Yes," I told him. "Of course I had. He'd asked me to, hadn't he?" "Good. Will you make us tea? Plenty of sugar for your grandmother, and good rich cream if you have any." We did not keep cows, but there was a bottle of milk left in the icebox. I carefully removed the wire from the top and pulled out the stopper, then dug the cream out with the back end of a spoon. I put it in a teacup for grandmother, measured the tea into the teapot, and poured hot water from the kettle. Then I arranged the teapot, cups and saucers, the milk bottle, and the sugar bowl on a tray and carried it up the stairs. I glanced at myself in the mirror on the landing, and I looked very small. Dr. Greenwood stayed with us all afternoon. We drank our tea and fed grandmother spoonfuls of hers. He helped me to move grandmother to her chair, and I cleaned her up while he hefted the mattress off the bed, carrying it downstairs and outside, where he said the sun would make it good as new tomorrow. Father could carry it back up when he returned. He made a new bed for grandmother on her settee, and I opened her chest of drawers in search of linens. Grandmother had a drawer full of teeth. I slammed the drawer shut and opened the one below it. It held handkerchiefs and undergarments. Then I remembered grandmother's trunk, a great brass-knuckled thing with a curved lid. The brass trimmings were oxidized to near black, and the key was not in the lock. I went to grandmother, dozing in her chair, and gently lifted the great brass locket she wore always around her neck. I opened it, and the key was inside, between the likenesses of her mother and grandmother. I knelt before grandmother's trunk. I had never been allowed to open it, but I needed linens for her settee. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and I lifted the heavy lid. Inside the trunk, I found wool blankets and clean linens. I carried them to the settee and went back to close the trunk. Inside it, at the bottom, were what appeared to be old linens, stained a rusty brown and shredded. I shut the lid. Dr. Greenwood and I made up grandmother's new bed, with wool below the linens as well as above. Grandmother could not use a bedpan, and I could not lift her. Dr. Greenwood carried her to the settee and made her comfortable. "When does your father return?" he asked, and I realized for the first time that I was alone with a strange grown man. "Tomorrow," I told him truthfully. Would he expect payment for his services? I knew where father kept a purse and could give him money, but perhaps he would not want money. I remembered suddenly that I was in my dressing gown and looked down at myself. I was plump and round, but not yet womanly. Dr. Greenwood looked down at me and smiled. "You poor child. You must be hungry. I have kept you working all day." "No, sir. Yes, sir, I am hungry, but I have been rude in neglecting to offer you dinner. May I prepare a meal for you?" He protested, but I had cold chicken pie, and we ate it in the drawing room in front of the fireplace, where I built a fire. "I promised to walk you to the neighbor, but the sun is setting and there are wolves." "Will you stay the night in father's room?" He started at the mention of wolves. "What did you say your father's name is?" "Trunka." He seemed to relax on hearing father's name. It is not the name that goes with the family crest. That name belongs to grandmother and was my mother's name too. Dr. Greenwood settled into father's room. That night I did not draw the curtains, and the wolves came up to the house, whining at the windows. I sat in my window seat until midnight, looking through the glass at them. When I went upstairs, I took my pillow and blankets and slept on grandmother's floor. Father returned. He paid Dr. Greenwood handsomely, though Dr. Greenwood protested. Father made sure Dr. Greenwood's carriage wheel was repaired, then sent for a nurse from the city. Grandmother improved some, and father moved her from the tower to the room near the kitchen so that she could get around using the chair the nurse brought her. It was a high-backed wicker chair with large wheels that glided smoothly across our stone floors. She regained enough strength in her arm to propel herself, but couldn't get far with only one good arm, so I pushed her where she needed to go. She would grunt and gesture, and we got to where we understood each other again. When the month drew to a close and the moon was nearly full, I heard father talking to grandmother. "I can't leave you," he told her, "not like this." Grandmother looked angry and sad, and she spoke as clearly as she had since the palsy struck. "You must." So father went away again, just as the moon reached fullness, bringing grandmother's nurse back to the city with him. I watched the two men leave, father tall and broad, and the nurse tall and narrow. That night I started to draw the curtains, and grandmother became distressed. I went to her, and she took my hands and spoke. I could not understand her words, but I thought I understood her meaning. "You want me to leave them open?" I asked. She nodded, her head lolling to one side. I wheeled her over to the window overlooking the meadow and took up my spot on the window seat. The sun set, the moon rose, and the wolves came. The large wolf whined at the window again, and grandmother leaned over the arm of her chair and placed her palm against the glass. The wolf leaned his head against her hand, separated by the glass. I watched in horror and fascination. Eventually grandmother fell asleep, and I righted her in her chair, wheeling her close to the dying fire. I slept on the rug that night. I woke in the wee hours when the fire had died down and the moonlight was shining in through the window. The house was very still. I put a log on the embers in the fireplace, then crept to the window and peered out. The wolves were sitting in their circle, looking at the house, unmoving. Grandmother called out in her sleep then, "Robert?" I did not know who Robert was. My mother's name was Robina, which is the feminine of Robert, but I did not know a Robert. I drew the curtains, tucked grandmother's blanket around her, and settled myself back in front of the fire. Grandmother woke in good spirits. I made us breakfast and wheeled grandmother out into the kitchen garden, where we drank tea. I had taken to making it more frequently on Dr. Greenwood's recommendation, in order to get the good rich cream into her, since she could not eat much. Her arm was strong enough to hold the teacup herself, and she sat happily in the garden, saucer in her lap, babbling about nothing. Or so I thought. After a time I thought I heard her say wolf, and I asked her to say it again, but she smiled and was quiet. That night I tried again to draw the curtains, and again she protested. Again she sat near the window. Again she reached out and touched the wolf through the glass. This time I felt more fascination than revulsion. I fell asleep on the window seat. In the morning I woke to find myself still on the window seat, covered by a warm blanket. I stood and looked around. I was alone. The house was cold, and I wrapped myself in the blanket before going to look for grandmother. I found her asleep in her chair in the garden, with the grasses around her trodden and broken. There was strange fur in her lap. "Grandmother, have you been out here all night?" She nodded and grinned at me. She would not say a word about her night in the garden with the wolves, no matter how much I pleaded with her to tell me what had happened. That night I wheeled her to her room, drew all of the curtains, and locked all of the doors. I slept on the kitchen floor, listening for her, but no sounds woke me. When father returned, he did not bring back grandmother's nurse. I did not know how to tell him what had happened. So I said nothing. Grandmother grew stronger so quickly that I half thought the night outside had cured her. It rained for 3 days, and I grew restless and irritable. Finally, it was dry. I began taking my walks again. It was autumn, and the leaves were turning colors. The birch trees were yellow, the maples red, and the elms orange. The grasses were still green, thanks to the rain. I walked the fence, trying not to think about how the wolves got in, or why they only came when Father was gone. Part of the fence went along the road. There was not much traffic. One day I happened to be walking in the same direction as a boy who was walking away from town. He had brown skin and darker brown hair and wore red trousers. He carried a bundle and waved hello to me. He was not wearing a hat. I waved hello back. The next day I saw him again. This time he spoke to me. "Hello," he said, waving again. He wore the same red trousers and no hat. I smiled and said hello back. Every day we said hello as we walked next to each other, separated by my fence. On Saturday he was not there. On Sunday he was not there. On Monday he was back, and I knew he must go to school in town. I leaned on the fence and called to him. "Hello, what are you carrying?" He came over to me and said, "I am carrying my books. Do you live here?" "Yes," I told him, "I'm Ersabet." "Are you a Pendergast?" he asked. "Yes, sort of. My mother was a Pendergast. My grandmother is a Pendergast. My father and I are Trunkas." "I'm Jeet," he responded, "Jeet Acharya." After that we spoke every afternoon. The moon went black, then began to wax again. As she grew, I came to dread the 3 days when Father would go away and I would be confined with grandmother, who might be mad. I confided in Jeet without telling him everything. "Father goes away every month and I am afraid of the wolves." "He goes away? Why?" I could not answer Jeet. I did not know. By the time Father went away again, grandmother could get herself from her bed to her chair and could use the chamber pot. Father brought her back to her room in the tower, though I was frightened because I could not carry her downstairs from there. Father assured me nothing would go wrong. I did not believe him, but I could not contradict him. In a way I was glad, because the tower was far from the wolves. I brought grandmother her dinner of bread and cabbage and roasted lamb. She pushed the meat aside and ate the bread. "Don't you feel well, grandmother? You always loved lamb." "I can't hear the wolves," she answered, and I didn't know what to say. "I'll leave your plate in case you get hungry later," I told her, and I went downstairs in the twilight. The wolves were starting to come toward the house, circling and looking in at the windows. I could have sworn the big one was looking for grandmother. I went to the window and he pushed his nose against the glass. I reached out and touched the glass, and I felt a spark course through me. I snatched back my hand and stood staring at the wolf in the window until I recovered my senses. I drew the curtains. In the morning, grandmother rang her bell, and I ran to her room. I found her sitting in bed, her hair down, soft grey curls cascading over her shoulders. She looked beautiful, but so thin and sallow, with light spots sprinkled across her nose and cheeks, some of them larger and browner now she is older. Grandmother was a beauty, or so she tells me. "Are you ready for your breakfast?" I asked her. "Porridge," she said. "Bring me my teeth." We had never spoken of the drawer of teeth, and I did not know how she knew that I knew of it. I carefully removed the drawer from her dresser and brought it to her, trying not to look at the dozens and dozens of loose teeth that filled it. There might have been hundreds. I ran downstairs and prepared grandmother's porridge along with my own. Milk and honey. The last of the butter until spring. Stewed apples. Soon we would tire of apples, but for now we had plenty of sugar and fat to bake them with. The lambs do not give much fat, but the pigs filled our stores with all we could need. We do not raise the animals ourselves. The wolves would eat them. We buy them every year and see them raised in town, then have them slaughtered and the meat cured to Father's exact specifications. When I returned, grandmother had arranged the teeth in little half-moons all over her bed. Most of the mouths had too many cuspids, the second sets too large for the rest of the teeth. I set grandmother's breakfast on her table and helped her over to it. "Do you see my teeth?" she asked me, and I tried not to scream. "Where did you get so many teeth, grandmother?" I asked, though I did not want to know the answer. "I collected them," she told me, and I did not know the answer. "My mother collected them before me," she added, and I still did not know the answer. We ate together, and I knitted while she showed me each set of teeth and told me who it belonged to. One was mother's, with an extra set of cuspids. One was mine, little pearl-like baby teeth with only one set of cuspids. One, she said, was Robert's. I still did not know who Robert was. He only had one set of cuspids. Then she swept all the teeth together in the center of her bed, running her fingers through them. Her cheeks were rosier, and her skin glowed a healthy golden. "Do you remember your mother, Bosie?" No one had called me Bosie since I was very small. "No," I told her, but I did not know if it was true. Sometimes I thought I remembered her, and other times I was sure my memories were only the stories I'd been told. Stories I'd heard that were not meant for my ears. Mother ran off. Mother died. Mother disappeared. The stories were not always nice stories. I knew, whether from memory or from stories and pictures, I could not say that Mother was beautiful, with long red hair and covered in freckles. I took after Father, dark and plain. Your Uncle Robert was my first. He died before your mother came. I did not know how to answer her in her renewed grief. That afternoon, while grandmother was asleep, I sneaked out to see Jeet. He rode a bicycle that day and leaned against the fence, still straddling it. "Father is away," I told him in a hushed voice. I did not tell him about my uncle. "Does he go away every month at the full moon?" Jeet asked me, and I nodded. "Don't you know what this means?" he asked, and I shook my head no. "I'll tell you tomorrow," Jeet said, pedaling off toward his home. "Wait," I called after him, but he was already gone. I was not ready for him to go. When he was near me, I felt something like hunger in my belly. The next day, I lost track of time finishing my knitting project and was late to meet Jeet. He was not there, but there was a package on the fence wrapped in brown paper with Erzsébet written on it in pencil. I tore off the paper and found a book. It was small and bound in what might have been leather. I left Jeet's gift, a knitted hat, on a fence post and took the book home and hid it under my pillow. When grandmother was asleep, I read by candlelight and the light of the moon. The book seemed to be the story of a woman whose husband disappeared every month at the full moon. The story was told by a doctor who was treating the woman for madness, only the woman was not mad. Her husband was turning into a monster every month. Was Jeet trying to tell me that my father went away every full moon to turn into a monster? I could not believe it. But then, why else would father have given me the book about Mr. Hyde? Why else would grandmother have insisted that he go, even when she was so ill? I could not account for his taking grandmother's nurse with him, unless perhaps he needed the nurse's help in some way. To keep from losing his mind, perhaps. Or his soul. I was not sure how such things worked. The next day, Jeet was wearing the hat I'd left for him, and I was glad. I asked him about the book, and he said that father was a werewolf. I don't believe it, I told him, although I did. I did not want to believe it. You must, he told me. And I did. Is there any silver in your house? Yes, I said, suddenly unsure. No, I don't know. What do you eat with? I described grandmother's flatware and the patina that I polished off the serving ladle every year at Yuletide. Copper or brass, he told me. I nodded. What about photographs? I admitted that we had none. I knew my mother's face only from the painting in father's room. Mirrors? We have one of those. It hangs on the landing. Well, he told me, it sounds like that is the only silver in the house. Definitely were. When father returned, I could not stand to look at him. I found that when father was at home, I was not hungry. He worried, but grandmother was unconcerned. She is almost a woman, she reminded father. I spent more time in grandmother's tower, sorting and resorting her teeth. She told me stories about each set. Some of them seemed like fairy stories. One child, many generations ago, was born with a full set of teeth. Another grew no teeth at all until well into childhood. Some of the stories were sad, others funny. She never told me any stories at all about mother's teeth. I held mother's extra cuspids in the palm of my hand like pearls. That month the wolves came on the night of the new moon. I looked out the window but did not see the large wolf who sometimes came to the window. Father drew the curtains and spoke to grandmother in hushed tones when he thought I could not hear him. I could not make out his words, but I knew they were about me. That night I dreamed about the wolves. I was alone in the woods, looking for them. I walked silently, my footfalls making no sound on the soft ground cover. The wolves found me, and I followed them as they ran free through the woods. I thought I glimpsed a woman in their midst, naked and wild, with huge tangles of grey and red and brown hair on her head and surrounding her body, which was pale and spotted with brown. I woke gasping for air and pulled a hairball from my tongue. The next 10 days were the loneliest of my life. Father did not speak to me, and grandmother seemed distant. My stomach felt empty, though I was not hungry. My back ached. I climbed the stairs to grandmother's tower and asked her to tell me about mother's teeth. She shook her head no, and instead showed me mine. "Your new teeth will come soon," she told me. "No, grandmother," I answered. "I have all of my teeth." She looked out the window for a long time, silent before answering. "I was older than you when I got mine," she said. "I had such a short time to use them. My change came so early. You were still a baby. It was before your mother left." She shut her mouth then and would not speak again. On the morning that father was to go away, I woke with a terrible pain in my mouth and a fire in my belly. I sat up and found 3 cuspids on my pillow, stained red. I stood and found a small pool of blood on my sheets, my undergarments soaked through. I felt a lump in my mouth and reached into it, pulling the 4th cuspid off my swollen tongue. I pulled on my dressing gown, gathered the teeth in my handkerchief, and walked down to the landing, where I gazed into the mirror. It was the only mirror in the entire house, and looking into it directly hurt my eyes. I opened my mouth, and a hideous grin looked back at me, with 4 new sharp teeth in the spaces where my cuspids had been. My new teeth. I went to the kitchen and took the kettle from the fire. I carried it to the landing and swung it in a wide arc, smashing the mirror into smithereens. The shards covered the stairs. I brushed them from my nightgown and they